Yamato said he doesn't think there are any scrim leaks for that G2 BDS lane swap. All right, here we go. I'll tell you why I think there were. And by the way, let me be clear about this, guys. When I say I think there were leaks, I don't mean that like literally people were sharing scrim VODs. What I mean is that I think the pro players always talk to each other. Sometimes they do share scrim VODs, by the way, little shitters. I think that it's especially common amongst Korean and Chinese teams at international events. I think that in the past, there have been Asian teams that have been very open with each other on opposite sides of the bracket about the other team's opponents that they're scrimming, because the main goal is to like get a Korean team to win Worlds. And so if you're on opposite sides of the bracket, you're scrimming potentially the other Korean team's opponents. And I think that almost certainly there has been significant data, if not outright video files shared between these teams. But in this case, I do not believe that a video file was shared. I think pro players were like, lol. They type in their little Discord with their little pro player fingers, lol. G2 was swapping in our scrim versus us, because they would have been more prepared if they actually had a video. I do not think or have evidence that there was any kind of swapping at all, to be clear. It's just my suspicion, and I'm going to show you why I suspect this. It's a little too convenient. Also, guys, when I tweeted about it, I was getting banter back from Duffman and Rodrigo, the analyst and coach from G2, who were saying, oh yeah, it was just really lucky. Like it's clear they're not going to accuse BDS of doing that, but even G2 staff appears to believe that there was some level of leak. And I'll show you why, because a lot of the evidence that people are citing here has nothing to do with the game that was played, including Adam on Twitter telling me about the FPX NIP game, which I've seen, that has nothing to do with what the lane swap was in that game. So I'm going to show you why this is suspicious, because all you guys are hearing is, oh, it happened in LPL. Oh, BDS did a Sion strat last year. None of that has any relevance to what I am about to show you. And when you watch the videos, you are going to see why this is suspicious, because you're not just getting second-hand information that these things are similar, because they're not really that similar. As I say this, let's take a look at FPX versus NIP Game 4. And because G2 said that they were inspired, and on Twitter, Adam said to me that they were aware and had watched this game. So first off, let's just talk about this. Differences that we see already. So first off, Shanji is playing Udyr, not Sion, and this is a Nautilus and not a Lulu. I do agree that when you play Sion and then Jinx Lulu, it is more suspicious that it is going to be a lane swap, which makes it easier to call if you're BDS. But again, this is not the same composition. Remember, they had an Aurelion Soul in the mid lane as well. So it's quite different already. Okay, we're going to pay extra close attention right now, guys, to this level 1. We do a standard spread, and then we recall out. This is very different than what we're going to see with the BDS G2 game. Very different. So there is no, first off, they're on red side. Very important to note they're on red side. They leave a ward behind. Then they are going to, in fact, walk into top lane. Shanji is showing here, and we've seen level 1 Udyr invades, especially into topside jungle starts, from red side into blue buff. This is very common. We see it around the world right now. So this is not unusual. Guys, it's not unusual because Udyr can be very annoying at level 1, especially compared to Redectin and Lee Sin, and especially if he has backup from Poppy here in the jungle. So the lane swap has begun, guys. Notice we saw recall from River. So they did a normal level 1 spread, the least suspicious thing of all time, recalled, walked to lane, Udyr comes in jungle, Poppy's applying pressure. This is also not weird in and of itself. Okay, so it's important to note how lane swaps used to work back in the day. It's very important to note this to understand. Now, typically, what happened with lane swaps is that you would have a 3-for-0 or a 4-0 push on your lane swap lane. And what this means is that we would see jungle follows in the early game. Remember, lane swaps are about denying the top laner first and foremost. And typically, whoever's top laner gets denied less experience and levels is the team that wins the lane swap. So what we would frequently see is, because the duo would be lane swapped up here, is an invade onto this side, and we would see a jungle follow. So the top laner will literally help the jungler take a few camps. Well, what happens up here is we slow push this wave into the turret, and then the top laner peels off, or the jungler can come too. That's what 3-0 is, when the top laner comes. So when the wave is coming in, to prevent anybody from taking that wave, the top laner can zone people off and goes to take down the turret and deny the minion wave. And sometimes the jungler comes too. So it is very dangerous to be one person under this turret when the wave crashes. You do not want to be the one person. You will get dove, you will die, you will be denied the XP. So the counterplay was literally to do the same thing on the other side of the map. Same shit, you invade, then you get 3 people at the turret, your top laner's there, but your top laner's following your jungler for the first 3 camps on this side, and then you decide, okay, this is when the wave is crashing, and your jungler can either go here or here into their own jungle. That is how you play. So what happens this game is weird, and I don't think NIP probably wanted to do an OG style lane swap and just do the invade, but Xiaolahu doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. So he actually just gets caught by Shanji, who's a level 1 Udyr. And again, this is a very common strat, and they would not know that this was a lane swap because Udyr invades at level 1 onto topside starting junglers are what we would consider normal. So Xiaolahu gets very low. Now look at what happens. NIP is going to hide in this brush because this guy is low, and they know if he goes to lane, he's dead. Okay, he's not technically dead, but you'll see why in a second. He's in a really rough situation where there either has to recall and then use his TP. Now, currently, he's not that worried because he thinks Shanji is just going to walk to this top side. But they have a ward down, and he comes back up because he doesn't see Shanji coming back. So he's like, ooh, maybe I can get some of that sweet, sweet lane action and heal up a little bit. I've got a pot. I've got Doran's shield. It's going to be a 1v1. Maybe I could get a level advantage, especially Shanji's showing in the mid lane. Oops. There's a Nautilus there. He actually does take E at level 1, and he double E's out, and he actually lives astonishingly. From now on, they just set up this dive, okay? But you'll also notice that on the bot side, because FPX doesn't know how to counter this Udyr is going to get the XP from the wave crashing into the turret. Meanwhile, Aki is level 2, so he has E now. So he can actually just flash E, Q, buckler shot, kill him, right? And Shanji's like, well, it's not crashing yet, so I might as well fuck with Kara in the mid lane because he's playing this garbage Diana that has no escape mechanism, so it's free, and we force a flash, and he has 0 HP, and we barely don't kill him. I mean, Rookie literally, it's like single-digit HP. So Shanji almost got a kill there as well. So they almost got 2 kills on both solo laners. And then you'll watch him go down here, and they're going to try this dive onto Shanji. Kara goes topside, but he gets wallbanged and killed because you actually you can't be there. You can't be there. It's illegal to be there in a lane swap. And by the way, this is typical also, which is that sometimes the top laner, after the first wave crashes, will swap lanes and hang out with the top laner for a little bit to catch the wave. Yeah, it is very hard. And also Udyr, as we're going to see, has very good pressure in the lane thanks to the wave clear of his R. Now, reworked Udyr was not a part, 10 years ago when this was happening, but he is collecting a lot of XP. And remember what I said, it's all about the XP, baby. Level 2, he just hit level 3. He might have 0 CS, but that doesn't matter. It's just he needs the levels. Diana already used TP, so they're going to use a TP here from Rookie's Ahri on this dive instead. So it actually just dissuades the dive entirely. And you're even on TPs because Shanji made the play to get him low. And then also Zhou is now here, and they get a kill, which is huge. So basically, FPX is getting styled on in this lane swap scenario. Oh my god, he gets Milky Way with that hook too, which is just mega. They get 3 kills. And the game's over now, guys. The game is over. Shanji is super ahead. They have perma prio. The Jinx is just cleaning up this in mid lane after pushing. They can now just swap lanes again if they want. Udyr can go top, catch this wave. He's like perma ahead of Xiaolahu basically after this wave crashes. And he is basically, because what Udyr does is he creates tempo by wave clearing super fast. They will constantly be 1 step ahead on the lane swap. And the purpose of this lane swap was to avoid the Hail of Blades, Varus, and the very abusive support Rumble from Life. So because FPX likes to play these super aggro bot lanes and get bot lane prio, NIP wanted to scale with a Jinx, but they didn't want to be in that lane that would absolutely crush them, which is the same thing that we're going to see with G2. They are in fact avoiding a double Hail of Blades Varus Ash lane. Udyr now has Prio in the top side. He's pushed up. He's a level up. You got a ton of kills. You have a 3k gold lead. And they're just going to keep switching, you know, the Udyr and Jinx back to back. The rest of the game is kind of irrelevant to the point that I'm making now. But remember that level 1. Now, I'm also going to show you something else because a lot of people are referencing, oh, BDS knows how to do this because they did the Sion cheese. So let's watch it. Let's see how similar this is to a lane swap. You guys tell me what you think. So if we go back to the draft, it's going to be a Sion pick here. And so we ask ourselves, okay, well, that's weird. This wasn't a Sion meta. And, you know, crucially, this BDS squad from last year, the only player they swapped was Crowny for Ice. So it's the same roster. So you say, oh, well, maybe they're used to some Sion cheese. This is not really anything like a lane swap, guys. And the fact that you can do Sion cheese, and let me just be clear, you can do a lot of different Sion cheese. You can do buff Sion cheese, where he like walks into enemy buff, takes the buff and then just commits suicide and then TPs to lane, or he takes the buff and then TPs to lane. You can do what they're doing, which is like dive cheese, or you can swap because Sion's very difficult to dive under a turret. He's very survivable and he's got decent push. And he, you know, he does stuff if he's dead, which is also important. And also, Gragas is very good in lane swaps, by the way, so maybe this is not the game to do that. It's not a lane swap, though, as you'll see. So they are going to be playing red side on this invade. They're taking a look at it, but this is actually somewhat similar to the old style of lane swaps, at least in the jungle pathing, but it's without the swap, which makes it very different because it's literally not a swap. It's also hilarious how badly executed this is, but we'll get into that. Remember how we said in the last VOD that typically when we lane swapped, we'd have your bot lane there, except they'd be top in this instance. Then we'd have the invade with the jungler in the top laner. So that's what this looks like. And this is what it would look like if FBX had played this properly and actually done this, except they were blue side, on the bot side, which is like, this is how you would start a 3-0 to 4-0 lane swap back in the day, is you literally just power up your jungler, super quick clear, mega leash, except because this isn't a lane swap and it was never intended to be a lane swap, they didn't swap and they would have no expectation that Jack Spectra and Mersa would be going top side. This is actually a tower dive. So they have a more powerful lane, they're pushing in, they crash the wave. That's wave 2. That's wave 2. So remember, because this is so fast, it's actually a second wave dive, which is a very creative strategy. They smell it because there's no Sion in the top lane. And so basically the idea here, guys, is at this point in time, there's kind of like a fork in the road. One of the forks says dive on the 2 wave. The other fork says TP top. So you have the opportunity for Sion to TP top and catch this wave. Or you dive and then TP top. Or you dive, tank with Sion, and then you TP top. Because he dies, he does some extra damage, you get a double kill, whatever, right? And you still catch this wave in the top side because nobody fucking expects a second wave turret dive with a Sion. So now you baited out this TP. So now, guys, Adam should TP top. This is where you abort the play and you TP top. However, Adam are very smart. And he literally gets his TP denied because Mersa hooks him blind in a bush because they read them like a fucking book. And then he loses the wave into the tower and is very sad. And also Sheo's in mid lane killing Ruby, which is, you know, a nice bonus. Now you see why the level 1 Sion is very good here because, I mean, you get a double kill, right? He actually trades back, which is great. You're going to lose a fuck ton in the top lane. The wave literally bounced off the tower and is now heading back, so top lane might get frozen. Yeah, now you're just fucked. Right? It's cool that you killed Thresh, cool that you killed mid, but Evie is just going to fat man fuck you in the top side forever. You're also down in levels on this bot side. But it turns into just a clown fiesta at this point in time. So, you know, when people were saying the other day, guys, when I made my presumption on Twitter/x.com that I thought it was very suspicious what we were seeing if there were no scrim leaks, I was told, well, you remember when BDS did the Sion strat? Does this look anything like a lane swap to you guys? Taking the first 3 camps looks like a lane swap, but nothing else looks like a lane swap. I guess the punish was kind of the same in that if the top laner TP'd into that situation, you dive them, but there are already 2 players in the bot side and Usually, you wouldn't do a play where it's like you force their TP and then TP into the top lane. The whole thing is just wacky. So, like, this isn't really an analog, and just because you did an instance of Sion cheese doesn't necessarily mean you know the lane swap is coming, and it doesn't make any sense why they would do the level 1 that they did in this game that we're about to watch. You guys can be the judge of this, because I'm pretty sure G2 shares my suspicions. And let's talk about the draft first, as the draft actually is important, and it does tip your hand. And I'll compile the evidence at the end, and we can kind of weigh up the pros and cons. So basically, we see the blind Sion. We are picking Jinx and Lulu into Varus Volibear, knowing that BDS loves Ashe and played a ton of Ashe in winter. There is 2x Hail of Blades in the bot lane, plus Divey Bear. You would be scared out of your mind to play Lulu Jinx into this. And also, Sion is not a great pick into Adam's God's top lane champion pool, right? This just seems weak. So I think any professional team would look at this and say, are there shenanigans afoot? The answer is yes. Now, here's a more relevant question. If you believe, and this is actually in BDS's favor, if you believed that this was a lane swap, would you R5 Aatrox? The answer is no. You know, it's much more reasonable to take the Zac, which, Broken Blade does later in the series. Gnar was often a popular answer back in the day. Now, a lot of champions have changed. There have been a bunch of new champions released. Gragas, great pickup. Adam also plays Gragas, so Gragas probably would have been a better answer here. I will say +1 point to BDS for not knowing that this was a lane swap by stupidly picking Aatrox. It does make it a little bit less suspicious. You know, the thing about this is that it's just so suspicious as to what happens at level 1, because they basically all in on the top side. So let's watch what happens, because you're going to see it's very different from those other games that I referenced. Remember in the FPX NIP game, we saw the spread through the river. They kind of do it this way again, but they're a little further back. And we're going to write down the information that BDS has. They immediately Oracle's Lens, so Lens is going to be down. They see Mickey X. That's Nuke's ward right there at 49 seconds. So they get 1 ward there. Check out their wards. They get 1 ward here, 1 ward here, and 1 ward here. These are not the wards that you put down for lane swaps, guys. Actually, this one is, to be fair. This one is. You ward here, and you ward here, and you ward here. The reason why you ward in these locations is because you need time to see what they're doing, and this covers every possible avenue that they could go to lane, and it gives you the earliest possible information about who is going to lane, because you need that time to adequately get the lanes that you want if you do not want to lane swap. And let's be clear, BDS does not want to lane swap. They do not want to get this Jinx super activated. They do not want to have a super poor Aatrox. They want to bully with this lane. They do not want to lane swap. So the wards you put down are here so that basically the ways you walk to lane, well, while hiding, right, are here, here, or through here. If you're walking all the way around, then you also have time to react. It is basically because in that case, sometimes you like stack up here in your mid lane so that as soon as you see somebody, you can assign lanes super quickly. Or you stand in your own jungle and like cheat towards one side. That's how this works. Also, Mickey X has Demolish in this game, which is hilarious on the Lulu because they want a lane swap. Okay. All right. So what did we see in the FPX game? We saw the quick recall and then they swapped lanes. And instead, what happened? Remember, this is really important, guys. This is really important to understand why I think there was a leak. What did they do in the FPX game? They recalled from River on the spread. Then they sent the Jinx and the Nautilus. Remember, they were on red side. So they sent them down this lane into this brush. Now, we don't see that here. They just back off and walk into this river for an invade. Okay, so remember, this is blue side doing the lane swap instead of red side, which is different. Most importantly, they recalled and just walked through lane. And why I'm mentioning that is because if they walk into lane, there'll be no evidence. There's no evidence where the Jinx and the Lulu are because the wards are here and here. So they could have backed off and they could have pushed into bot. They could have backed off and they could have pushed into top. Now, you may ask yourself, why would they push into bot? Well, here's the thing. It is very common in the current meta, so not in the meta back in the day, crucially, very common in the current meta, if there is a bully lane down here, to have 4 or 5 people go into these brushes with a lens. They have a lens. and clear wards, especially so the Hail of Blades lane can't get early vision and Hail of Blades proc you in the brushes. So having no wards means that it is a possible not lane swap, and this is very, very important because they could have just recalled and 5-stacked or 4-stacked here to get lane prio for their losing lane to prevent them from losing as hard. I don't think that's the most likely outcome, but it is a possibility. So instead, we see Mickey X here. We see Jinx walk to lane through lane, just like the Jinx in the last game. And let me ask you a question, guys. Here's the big mystery. Given the information that BDS have, so the information they have is 1, Mickey X was here at 49 seconds. No idea where he is now. There could be 4 people in this brush. There could be 4 people up here. It is true, again, usually the lane swap starts with the jungle and top lane going for the invade. But my point here is BDS is gambling everything on this being a lane swap. What happens, guys, with the amount of information they have if Jinx and Lulu just pop up here? There is no way for Ice and Labrov to get into this lane. And even though they have a very, very powerful 2v2, they're going to be behind. There's also the possibility that everybody walked through this brush. How does BDS know that this isn't the play that was going to happen to them? That they did last year. Because the BDS play was, we're going to walk in here. We're going to take these 3 camps with Sion. Then we're going to threaten a dive on the 2-wave. Now, it's unlikely that Hansama and Mickey X would be able to push into Hail of Blades, Varus, or Ashe. But guys, how could they get that push? Oh, well, if Ice and Labrov aren't there, that's a great way to get that push that they need into that bot turret. And then you have 2 people in the jungle. One of them's going to be a Rel who has a higher level than either Ice or Labrov, intercepting them on the way to the turret. So with the amount of information that they have, my question and why I suspect that there was a leak, even though I can't possibly know, let me underscore that, I can't possibly know, is because they all end at 1:30 into the top side with no recent information when this could have been literally the Sion play that they made last year. And instead, they get Sheo's in this brush. G2 does not see Sheo go into the brush. They get seen, and then they get collapsed on. Like, BDS loses if it's not a lane swap, is the point that I'm trying to make. So you guys decide, was this an incredibly good gamble by BDS that it was in fact a lane swap? In which case, I mean, they still lose this game, and they still play the lane swap super bad. But did they really just all in on this being a lane swap with the very limited amount of information that they have? I would argue that this is either a scrim leak or stupid. You pick which one it is. It's either scrim leak or stupid, because to all in right here could potentially lose you all your advantages. You might end up in a lane swap anyway. So if Ice and Labrov are here and they go up here because nobody's showing, but all of a sudden Jinx and Lulu just pop up in this bot lane, well, then you just gave G2 what they wanted. You just gave to G2 the lane swap they wanted. So they literally rolled the dice on this, but I find it very suspicious that they would all in on a possible topside invade when this could have equally been, in the current meta, a push through the bot lane early on in the game with 4 or 5 people to detect wards, or an invade into their own jungle. And the result of this play could be that Ice and Labrov have to go topside even if there aren't any shenanigans. But it is suspicious. You know, the blind pick Sion, especially into Adam's champ pupil, is mega suspicious. I agree with that. I think that BDS was correct that there were some shenanigans. Playing Jinx Lulu into Varus Ashe double Hail of Blades is garbage. So there's that issue as well. But again, guys, it's about the fact that BDS 5 stacks in their top jungle with almost no information when this could have been one of several different plays, and they lucked into the right one. Perhaps, I mean, we can argue it's the most likely one, but it does seem very unusual to me. The evidence that was offered, such as, oh, we saw NIP versus FPX do this. This looks nothing like the beginning of the game of NIP versus FPX. Nothing like it, besides the fact that there was a topside invade, but the actual play pattern was super different. And it doesn't look like anything like the Sion cheese that we saw from BDS last year. Did BDS deny the leak? Well, Adam denied my tweet about it, which is why we're watching this video. Nobody's ever going to admit this, guys. I'm never going to have any evidence. Chakarez, for what it's worth, was listening to comms, and he said he didn't hear any indication of that. But again, BDS is not going to be like, it's just like we heard in scrims about their scrims. They're lane swapping. They're just going to be like, they're lane swapping. Most people would just be like, oh yeah, we heard, they're lane swapping because they had a conversation about it previously. Like there are a ton of different Sion cheeses that you can do. Some of them do involve going into the top side jungle, right? But also, they could have just gone into the bot side jungle like BDS themselves did last year in the 2v2. Threaten the dive. Even if they see that coming, Ice and Lebrov are going to be far less likely to push. And even if they do push, okay, you clear the side of the jungle. And because the map architecture has changed, guys, Adam is going to be slow rolling this wave. So let's pretend they do the bot side thing that BDS did. Okay, so they spread out. And then, okay, so Sion and Rel go in here. They push in together as 4. Then they double back. And at that point, Ice and Lebrov have to think about, do we push this out? And because the architecture of the map has changed, this path is now super dangerous, right? It's not just a tower dive anymore. If they push and use their aggressive advantage, then they could just be ganked from behind. You guys know, if you play bot lane, red side bot lane is ass cheeks. It's so easy to get ganked there. So my assumption from my knowledge of how lane swaps used to work, from watching these other games, is that BDS, it's either they hard gambled on a lane swap or they knew that G2 was lane swapping and so they did a 5-man play here. So that's why I made the tweet I did. I think it's reasonable to be suspicious that this was a scrim leak. And I think that on the balance, I think this is more likely a scrim leak than not a scrim leak. And if your question was, well, how did they not have a better response to this? Lane swaps are very complicated. And if none of these players on BDS have ever played, they're too young to have played in this meta, whereas like Caps has played in this meta, Hansama's played in this meta, Mickey X has played in this meta, I believe. And, knowing it's going to happen is far different than actually living it. And you can see as this series goes on, they try different stuff and it still is scuffed. It's also possible, like, we don't know when if it was leaked, when they would have heard about it. They could have heard about this, guys. Like, they could have just been going to the studio and then all of a sudden one of the BDS guys talks to a different team and they're like, oh yeah, G2 they've been swapping. So they may not have had time to prepare. There's so many different ways that the leak could have occurred. And I do think that it was likely, if it happened, was kind of innocuous and not overly detailed. But I just find this, out of all the possibilities, the fact that Ice and Lebrov gambled on swapping themselves here and then therefore getting the unfavorable lane matchup with the amount of information they had, super sus. If I'm playing Among Us, I'm calling a fucking emergency meeting over this, dude, because somebody on BDS is definitely the imposter. Deductive logic says that they're either dumb or giant-ass gamblers, or they knew something. And also, the only reason they have a gold lead here is because of the bad level 1. And G2 does do a good job of, like, wrestling back into this game and winning it. But this really did neutralize G2's early game strategy. I mean, credit to BDS. Like, if the question is, was BDS's play at level 1 good? The answer is yes. It's quite good. I just don't know how they could have known. And if they didn't know, I don't know why they took such a huge gamble. That's where we're at, guys. Those are my thoughts. Again, I want to reiterate, I do not have any evidence. I only have 15 years of watching this game played professionally, deep knowledge of the lane swap meta, understanding of how this has been used recently to fuel my suspicions. I also made this point. But if this had been a game in the regular season, in the round robin, where the draft was pre-recorded and you had 20 minutes to talk about it, I would find this much less suspicious. But because this is like the draft goes directly into the game and the coaches don't have a long time to talk about this, because I'm sure the coaches know about this, guys. I think BDS's coaches are very good. I think BDS is a very coordinated team. I actually think BDS is a pretty good team. So it's not shade at BDS. Although they were hilariously bad in these games because, again, I don't fault them. They just haven't played the lane swaps. So, look, I'm allowed to tweet my suspicions about this. G2's staff, in my opinion, seem to agree with my claims. BDS's did not. But I'm not just going to sit here while Adam and his French horde descend upon my Twitter and not explain in detail why I find this suspicious. So what do you guys think? Or at least the voice comms. I mean, Shakarez heard the voice comms and he doesn't suspect anything. So dumb luck. Possible. Either they knew or took a huge gamble, had zero info. Yep. Why would they say they saw this leaked in the voice comms? That's what I said. They wouldn't just be like, hey, it's just like the leak. They'd just be like, it's a lane swap. Execute defense pattern delta. Probably leaked a few hours before the game and lots of last minute prep work. That is my guess. But we can't know, and we won't know. I'll just get flamed by French people. And you'll notice I'm the only one actually explaining shit here. Who of G2 staff said they agreed with you? They didn't say they agreed with me. Let's be clear. Where I say, I like the part where they foiled your first game level 1 by clearly getting scrim leaks. No other ways they would have their bot lane at their red at 130 Lamau. G2 Rodrigo, their analyst. It was just a very good flip by them. You guys decide what that means. Given the short amount of time from the FBX NIP game to the BDS G2 games, the lack of time for scrims every week, I cannot see anyone magically preparing for this to be in the exact right place or to suddenly have mastered understanding of it to counter, especially when you've never played against it ever. Oh, Labrov is just really smart. Yeah, sure. There's also another possibility, guys, which you may not have considered. The whole team might not have known. What if Labrov knew that G2, somebody told Labrov didn't tell anybody, and then when they get into game, Labrov knew that they might lane swap, and so he made this call. Doesn't take the whole team knowing, just takes one guy. So, it's possible that Adam believes that he is telling the truth, even though he's doing it in a very shitty way, and that Labrov just made a call, but it's also possible that Labrov is the only person with knowledge of this on the side of BDS. So, that's my take, guys.